Let me read to you a passage from the 19th chapter of St. Matthew's Gospel, verses 3 to 12. It's the Gospel for Friday of the 19th week in Ordinary Time. I will only read part of it because it is a long passage. St. Matthew writes, "Some Pharisees came to Jesus to test him. They asked, 'Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any and every reason?' 'Have you not read,' he replied, 'that at the beginning the Creator made them male and female, and said, "For this reason a man will leave his father and mother, and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh"? So they are no longer two but one. Therefore, what God has joined together, let man not separate." The disciples said to him, "If this is the situation between a husband and wife, it is better not to marry." Jesus replied, "Not everyone can accept this word, but only those to whom it has been given. For some are unmarried because they are not capable, others because of circumstances, and others have renounced marriage for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. The one who can accept this should accept it." That's from Matthew chapter 19, verses 3 to 12. What does it suggest to us? Well, it speaks of a very high calling. What do I mean? You know, one of the most magnificent things in the world is marriage. Across virtually all cultures, marriage is celebrated with special pomp, and it is seen as the normal fulfillment of the heart's dreams. A boy and a girl grow up, and they normally aspire to be married. In principle, it brings to the couple some of the greatest joys in life. If this hope of being married to a suitable spouse is foiled or frustrated, it can be one of life's greatest disappointments. You know, I remember years ago listening to an interview with one wealthy and persistent contestant for the America's Cup. He was a very good man, and his principal hobby was to compete for the cup. He was asked what was the biggest disappointment in life for him, and his answer was that there had been two disappointments in life. He had never won the America's Cup, and he had not found a spouse in life. It was a wonder that he had not found a spouse, because he was not only wealthy, but he had a good and attractive personality. It is natural to wish to be married, and it is an institution which is surrounded by the laws of whatever society one is referring to. The Australian Aborigines, present on the Australian continent for many thousands of years, had an elaborate set of rules that protected marriage. So important is it that in any yearning for the divine, man would naturally wonder what was the intent of the deities in respect to it. In the case of the Australian Aborigines, the violation of marriage rules carried religious sanctions, and of course social ones. It was a religious matter, as was so much else in Aboriginal society. I mention this simply to illustrate its universal importance. When we turn to historical revelation, that revelation granted to the chosen people of Israel, marriage is given a wondrous status. Consider its mention in the first pages of the Bible. God created man in his image. In the divine image he created him. Male and female he created them. Genesis chapter 1 verse 27. From the outset it is intimated that man as united to his spouse is reflecting the divine. That is to say, marriage is a reflection of the divine. It ought then be lived as the Creator intended. In our Gospel today that I read earlier, our Lord reiterates the teaching of the first chapters of Genesis. The divine plan is that if there is a true marriage, then it is indissoluble. Many marriages do not fulfill the requirements of a true marriage. The two spouses in such a marriage, a true marriage, become one. Not only is this divinely revealed, but the instincts of man generally point in this direction. All know that marriage is the door to happiness, to blessings, and to fruitfulness in life. But of course, if this is to happen, the laws that are inscribed in marriage by the Creator must be observed. To take a parallel, man finds his natural happiness in society, but if the natural laws of living in society are not observed, then it is unhappiness that will ensue. Everything has its natural structure, and if it is to flourish, its structure must be respected and actively supported. Society must protect the natural structure of marriage and surround it with a culture that holds it in veneration. Otherwise, it will bring not happiness but unhappiness. Yes, marriage as God intends it is one of the most magnificent things in the world. And with good reason, its prospect brings joy to individuals, to families, and to all. But now, having set before his disciples the high and beautiful vocation of marriage, in our gospel today that I read earlier, our Lord presents them with something more lofty still. For those so called, there is the path of renouncing even this, for Jesus Christ and his reign. God had described himself as the bridegroom, the husband. His spouse was his chosen people. It is an expression that is at the forefront of some of the prophets. Our Lord was described by John the Baptist as the bridegroom, and he himself applied the same term to himself when approached by the disciples of John. He is the bridegroom. In the long history of the church, numerous members of Christ's faithful have heard the call of God in their hearts to make Christ the bridegroom of their souls. By solemn promise, they pledge their hearts directly to him and preserve their hearts for him alone. This pledge is sanctioned by the church. The fruitfulness of their lives parallels that of Christ the bridegroom of the church. It is a higher vocation from God because it involves the direct gift of one's heart to him, a gift lived out with grateful fidelity throughout one's life. The calls of Christ are multiform. Each has his or her distinct call. Marriage is a high call and is the path to holiness for those called to it. In the teaching of the church, there is a still nobler call, and that is the call to celibacy for the sake of Christ and his reign. In it, the soul gives itself to Christ, to belong to him exclusively. In him, in Jesus Christ as in its spouse, the soul serves the kingdom, and thus assists all to attain the holiness intended by God. Great are the ways of God.